Cricket is often thought of as being quintessentially an English game. In fact, its origin is largely unknown. Now there is a man who believes he has discovered its roots. After years of doing his own research, he has gathered evidence which shows cricket started in Ireland, and it may also explain why there are some unusual words in today's cricket. That man is James Caulfield. He grew up in County Wexford in southeast Ireland. When he was a child, he played an old game called catty. He believes it was this game that was the forerunner to cricket. And now he wants to tell the world.
This is the house where I was born in 1937. And this is the area where we used to play. Myself and my brothers, we've spent many an hour playing catty right here at this spot. We just drew a circle. We drew a circle in the road just about here. The road wasn't surfaced at that time, and we just drew a circle in the dust. And I can imagine myself here, and I hitting the catty and driving it up the road and running from here to there, and my brothers and the neighbouring children doing the fielding. So it's nice to come back and see the old place again. Can you imagine me coming out through that gateway over there in my bare feet with a shillelagh stick and little bits of sticks that we used to use in lieu of a ball? There was no money involved. Anybody could play it, and it was a fun thing.
As a young man, he left Ireland to work in England, where he later joined the British Army, and it was there he learned to play cricket. With the army, he travelled the world and visited places where cricket was played. When he left his regiment, he returned to Ireland and began to have a fresh perspective on the two games he played.
It's only when I travelled that it eventually dawned on me that this game was a very ancient game that our ancestors played right down through the millennia. And it travelled from here to all over the world, literally, in the form of cricket and baseball and ice hockey, golf.
The game of catty, which he always thought was a simpler version of cricket, he now realises is an ancient form of the game. These days, James lives with his wife in the magnificent house, the Slaney Manor, named after the river that flows nearby. They've turned their house into a bed and breakfast. And close to it, James has built his own castle for conferences and wedding receptions. Now, James wants to pass on his knowledge of catty to a younger generation. Most have never heard of the game, as it is rarely played these days. So he's invited the local Hurley team to his home to teach them how catty is played. According to James, the history of catty began when early man used the shillelagh, a willow stick that has many uses, sometimes as a weapon and others as a bat for hitting a ball or short stick, known as a cat.
This is a replica, a miniature replica of the ancient shillelagh. And this is what tourists are mainly familiar with. But this is the original. This is the thing that was all important, right down through the ages in Irish sporting legends. The only equipment you needed was the shillelagh and a piece of stick. The cat comes from the Irish language word catty, which means to bowl. And having secured a shillelagh and a cat, the next thing you needed was a piece of ground. And then you traced a circle on the ground, like so, and you drew a line in front of the circle. This defined the crease. Crease, C-R-I-O-S, the Irish language word for area or zone. And in the crease we have a circle. A circle in the Irish language is known as a bail. In today's game of cricket, the little bits of stick that sits on top of the stumps still retains the title the bails.
In cricket, the crease defines the area within which the batsman and the bowler play.
When a batter comes into bat in the game of catty, he was taking possession of the crease. And the Irish language word for tenure is sal wicket, easily transmitted as wicket.
In cricket, the wicket is the stump and the bails, and the wicket is lost when the batsman is bowled out by the ball hitting the stumps. In catty, the pitch is laid out with a bail and crease at both ends, which are about 20 paces apart.
We refer to the boundary as the creaky. Creaky in the Irish language means the limit of the territory, and etymology has converted that to cricket.
Up to now, the origin of the word cricket, as well as many of the game's other words, has long baffled both its enthusiasts and historians. But it's not just cricket's connection with Irish words that enthuses James. It is the fact that catty has deep Irish roots that evolved from early stick and ball games that were played in Ireland.
The original ball was more than likely natural pebbles that you'll find in most seashores. And ancient man would have used his cudgel to tap these along the ground and to make a game of it. One of the earliest games that we're aware of is a game called puck fodder. Puck fodder translated means a long stroke.
The game was similar to a basic form of golf, except you had to hit a round stone further than your opponent without losing it. Then, the shillelagh was used as a club. On reaching the end, the one who used the least number of strokes won the game. When the Irish settled in Scotland in the 12th century, it is possible that they brought this game with them, and by the 15th century, it was there that modern golf was established. As the game evolved, so did the ball.
These were later made of wood. This particular one is made from laurel. It won't shatter either. It will take a beating. And when these weren't available, and very often they weren't, we substituted these for short pieces of stick. And these were always available. There was no scarcity of short bits of stick. It's almost like in this day and age, if kids are playing in the street and if they haven't got a football, they'll be quite happy to kick a tin can. So this is the equivalent of a tin can. Then we have this. The modern hurling ball would be something of this nature, maybe a bit smaller. But this ball was made specifically for ground hurling. The stick that proved to be the most suitable, the stick that could withstand a bit of hardship, proved to be what we know as the Sally stick, which is in actual fact a willow. The willow grows naturally in Ireland. You'll find it growing everywhere.
Sally Gardens were plots of land where willow was cultivated for making baskets and fences, as well as shillelaghs.
This is a freshly cut shillelagh, which grows naturally with a curve on. And when this is cleaned up, you end up with a shillelagh like this. That's one cleaned up, and this is ready to go.
The quality of the shillelagh, one made of the very best willow, was highly sought after and treasured, as it became very much part of its owner.
If you had a good hurling stick, and if it was magical, if you could perform well with it, if you scored many goals, and if you excelled on the playing fields, then your stick qualified for the title she. So it being a Sally stick, and you add to that the she title, so you end up with a she Sally, commonly known as a shillelagh. She was given to anything that was important, beautiful, powerful, any person who stood above the rest, any machine, the phenomena, all these things qualified for the title she.
The mystical power of willow, or Sally, is embedded in Irish culture that's reflected in a poem by W.B. Yeats about a romantic meeting in a Sally garden where willow grow.
Down by the Sally gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally gardens with little snow white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her would not agree. In a field by the river, my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she laid her snow white hand. She bid me take life easy as the grass grows on the whiz. But I was young and foolish, and now I'm filled with tears.
The shillelagh has always been linked to Hurley, a game that predates any recorded Irish history. It is thought to have been played in Ireland 2,500 years ago. Historically, a priest blessed players before the game commenced. The object of the game is for both teams of 15 players to use a hurley stick to hit a small ball between two goalposts. The game was played on a pitch called a shinty. That name is also given to a Scottish game similar to hurley that is thought to have been brought over by the Irish when they came to Scotland. When a ball is hit over the bar, it is worth 1 point. A ball hit under the bar is a goal, and it is worth 3 points. The power of the shillelagh was even revered by the monks, who honed their battling skills whenever they had free time. All games, such as Hurley and Katty, were played by the clergy, which they took with them abroad as missionaries, spreading these games to remote places around the world. These revered sticks were thought such a prominent part of Irish culture that a shillelagh dance was often performed before a Hurley or catty match. The shillelagh was so essential in those days that many people not only played games with it, they carried it everywhere they went, sometimes to protect themselves. Shillelaghs were often used like swords when two opponents tested their skills against each other. It was the power of the shillelagh as a dangerous weapon that brought its demise. Despite Ireland being invaded by the Celts and the Vikings, their sporting culture grew. But in the late 12th century, Ireland was invaded by the Anglo-Normans, the first of England's grip on the country and its culture.
When the Anglo-Norman administration took over here in Ireland in the 12th century, they were very suspicious of young lads running around with these hurley sticks, and they saw them as a serious threat. So they banned the game of hurling.
The ban did not deter some from keeping the game alive. High on the mountain of Slieve Culture, they secretly held Hurley matches.
This is the plateau where the secret games took place. They were out of view from the people in the lowlands, and they could play in peace and comfort up here.
A century later, Katty was to face a similar fate as Hurley did.
When Oliver Cromwell paid us a visit in 1649 or thereabout, one of the things he found objectionable was the Irish preference for playing cricket. And he ordered that all the shillelaghs and the cricket balls should be burned.
This suggests that cricket was widespread in Ireland when it was almost unheard of in England. A few years later, when Cromwell had gone, the ban on cricket, or catty, was lifted, and the game began to thrive once more.
The game of catty was allowed to continue. That was seen as a more benign activity, which wasn't seen as a threat. So the people here could only play the game of catty. And it's extraordinary to recall that the Kilkenny people who lived in the shadow of the Parliament, they had to stick strictly to the rules, and they became experts at playing catty. And the Kilkenny hurling team to this day are known as the Cats as a result.
The British Army soon took advantage of its popularity and adopted it.
But then the same people who recognised these young hurlers going around playing hurling as a military threat, they realised that here in Ireland there was an unlimited supply of cannon for them. And they began recruiting here. And they recruited young Irishmen into the British Army in large numbers.
And it wasn't long before catty was regularly played within the British Army. By the 18th century, catty was often played between Irishmen in the British Army and the locals. So how was the game of catty played?
The object of the game was that the bowler would bowl the cat from a circle 20 paces away, and if the batter failed to hit the cat and it dropped into the circle, he was out. In the modern game of cricket, we refer to the keeper as the wicket keeper. The person who stood here was known as the bailiffin. He was the one who was in charge of the circle, and he was the one who decided whether the cat was in the circle or out of the circle. He stands here and he has to remain rigid, and the target for the bowler is the bailiff's legs. If he hits the legs and it falls into the circle, the batter is out. It's interesting that the bailiff's legs were effectively the ancient stumps. If the batter succeeds in hitting the cat and driving it over the boundary, he scored 6. If it fell short and rolled over, he scored 4. Or he could run from one circle to the other and score 1 for each run.
James is keen to show another piece of evidence that connects cricket with its Irish stick and ball games.
This is a further development. Some would say that this was more like a Hurley stick.
At Lord's in London, the home of cricket, there is a display of bats from the earliest in 1720 to the present day, and the oldest one is surprisingly similar to an Irish bat. James is in no doubt that there is a convincing connection between the Irish shillelagh and the original cricket bat. He also sees a strong link between the way cricket and catty are played, including some of its unusual words that clearly connects to the Irish language.
Probably the most convincing evidence of the link between this game of catty and cricket is in the language. The most important player on a cricket pitch is the bowler. He is doing the most important work. And it just so happens that the Irish word for work is ubber. And in the original game, when the bowler managed to lodge the ball or the stick into the circle, an Irish player would say something like, "Shin upper das." That's a nice piece of work.
And in cricket, this good piece of work, called the over, is bowling the best of your 6 balls.
When the batter was dismissed before he had a chance to put a score on the board, he was said to be durach, which sounds awfully like duck.
Durach means morose or gloomy. In cricket, when the batsman is knocked out without scoring any runs, he is said to be out for a duck, which is pretty miserable. There are many more cricket words that appear to be connected to the Irish language.
In this game, we had the term silly. Silly is the Irish language word for expectation, because this is the direction that you were expecting the batter was going to hit the ball in that direction.
Fielders in catty took up silly positions because they predict the batter to strike the cat in that direction. Silly positions in cricket have a similar meaning in that the fielders are placed unusually close to the batsman, catching a predictable strike.
In the game of catty, the short leg position was described as clegg beag, which translates to a short stroke.
James is convinced that the word clegg was then pronounced leg, and so a short stroke becomes a short leg.
But when you hit this and it went off into the long grass, there's a good possibility that it was going to get lost. And in the Irish language, if the cat was lost, it was said to be coucha. This translates to cow corner.
In catty, the fielder did not frequent that part of the field, as it was often difficult to pinpoint exactly where the cat would land. And in cricket, cow corner is a similar place, as few shots are legitimately aimed to this part of the field, and so fielders are rarely placed there.
In the game of catty, there was an element called the googally. Googally is the Irish language word for to deceive somebody or to send somebody on a fool's errand.
This sounds very similar to googly, which in cricket is a deceptive spinning delivery of the ball by the bowler that gives it an unexpected bounce.
The way it worked in the game of catty was that when somebody managed to hit the cat over the boundary, that triggered off the googally. And this is a situation where the batters didn't know which of the wicketkeepers held the cat. It developed into a cat and mouse situation where they had to estimate which one had it.
Only one of the two wicket-keepers holds the cat under his shirt. If the batsman believes his wicket-keeper doesn't have the cat, he makes a quick run. But if his wicket-keeper does have it, he quickly drops it into the circle before the batsman returns, so declaring him out. On the other hand, if the opposite keeper doesn't have it, and the batsman on that side makes a sudden run, the other keeper must throw the cat to his opposite number, so he can quickly knock the batsman out by dropping it into his circle. With the Irish playing catty in the British Army, James believes the game became widespread, and by the 19th century it was developed into cricket as we see it today.
16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, there was times when there was more Irishmen in the British Army than there was English, and they brought this simple game with them. And wherever they were stationed, in India or Ceylon or Pakistan or Australia, New Zealand, they could play this game because you needed no money to get it going. All you needed was a bat and some little bits of stick and a piece of ground. Usually the barrack square for the soldiers. And of course they played it amongst themselves, and they played it with their English comrades, and they also played it with the local people where they served. So the game developed and it spread round the empire and back to the UK, and the game was anglicised in England, and it became a gentleman's game, and it was reintroduced into Ireland in the 18th century. But ordinary people couldn't afford to play it because they needed expensive equipment and special clothes. So they continued to play the game of cat.
Once more back in his hometown, James reflects on his early days as a child playing catty.
Very often we were called in for food and we were reluctant to go because we hadn't finished the game. And sometimes you'd knock your toe against a stone in the road and you'd be injured and you'd be limping around, but you'd still carry on playing. I assumed at that stage that we had adapted cricket to suit our meagre circumstances here. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that this was the original game and cricket was a development.
Today, James is keen to explain to the next generation how the game of catty is played and why this ancient sport was the foundation of modern cricket.